The idea to escape to a remote cabin in the Pacific Northwest came from a place of desperation, a need to break free from the suffocating grind of city life. Work had become a blur of deadlines and fluorescent lights. My apartment, a claustrophobic box of sleepless nights and unanswered emails. I craved solitude, silence, and the chance to rediscover myself through the lens of my camera, capturing the raw beauty of nature. Misty forests, quiet streams, the kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. So, I booked a weekend at a secluded cabin I found online, its listing promising a rustic retreat deep in the woods, far from civilization. I packed my camera gear, 2 DSLRs, tripods, and a laptop for editing, envisioning serene shots of pine trees and morning fog. But as I set out, a faint unease stirred in my gut, a whisper of doubt I couldn't quite shake. The drive was long and grueling, 5 hours of winding highways that narrowed into a rutted dirt road swallowed by towering pines. The sun had set by the time I reached the forest, the sky a starless void cloaked in thick, rolling fog that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. My car's headlights struggled to pierce the mist, casting eerie beams that caught fleeting shapes, twisted branches, shadows that seemed to dart just out of sight. The road grew bumpier, the gravel crunching under my tires, each jolt amplifying the knot of anxiety in my chest. The GPS flickered, its signal faltering, but it led me to a clearing where the cabin stood, a dark silhouette against the dense trees. The cabin was smaller than I'd imagined, a squat structure of weathered logs and moss-stained shingles, its edges softened by the fog like a half-remembered dream. The air was heavy, damp with the scent of wet soil, decaying leaves, and something sharper, like rust or old blood. I parked and stepped out, my boots sinking into the gravel, the crunch unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. The pines loomed overhead, their branches clawing at the sky, swaying in a breeze I couldn't feel. My camera bag felt heavier than usual, slung over my shoulder as I approached the wooden door, its surface warped and splintered, etched with faint scratches that looked too deliberate to be natural. I fumbled with the key I'd been mailed, its cold metal biting into my palm, and pushed the door open. The hinges groaned, a low, mournful sound that echoed into the night like a warning, as if the cabin itself were protesting my arrival. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust that swirled in the beam of my flashlight. The main room was sparse, a stone fireplace, cold and ash-streaked, a sagging couch covered in faded plaid, and a rickety table littered with cobwebs. A narrow hallway stretched into darkness, leading to what I assumed were bedrooms, their doors closed and silent. The walls were lined with wood panels, scarred with deep, jagged scratches that resembled claw marks, as if something had tried to tear its way out or in. Scattered across the floor were old photographs, their edges curled and yellowed, depicting people in outdated clothing. Men in stiff collars, women in long dresses, their faces stern, their eyes hollow and unblinking. I knelt to pick one up, the paper brittle under my fingers, and felt a chill crawl up my spine as the woman in the image seemed to stare directly at me, her gaze piercing through the faded sepia. I swept my flashlight across the room, the beam catching cobwebs in the corners and a cracked mirror above the fireplace. its surface smudged with what looked like a handprint, too large to be mine, its edges glistening as if freshly made. My heart skipped a beat, and I stepped back, the floorboards creaking under my weight. The sound, I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was just the isolation, the long drive, playing tricks on my mind. But the photographs on the floor, the scratches on the walls, the smudge on the mirror, they told a different story, one I wasn't ready to hear. As I stood there, my camera bag still slung over my shoulder, the unease grew into a quiet certainty. I wasn't alone in this cabin, and whatever was here had been waiting for me. The cabin's oppressive silence pressed against me as I stood in the main room, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the dust-filled air. The claw marks on the walls, the smudged handprint on the mirror, and the staring photographs scattered across the floor lingered in my mind. But I pushed them aside, determined to focus on my purpose. I was here to capture nature, to find peace through my camera's lens, not to let an old cabin's quirks unnerve me. My hands were still unsteady as I set my camera bag on the rickety table, its surface scarred with gouges that matched the walls, as if something had clawed at it in a frenzy. I told myself it was just the isolation, the long drive playing tricks, but the air felt heavier now, thick with a presence I couldn't name. I unpacked my gear with deliberate care, hoping the familiar routine would anchor me. The main room, with its cold stone fireplace and sagging plaid couch, seemed like the heart of the cabin, so I set up my primary DSLR on a tripod facing the open space. Its lens glinted in the flashlight's beam, a small reassurance of control in the gloom. I positioned a second camera at the mouth of the narrow hallway, its lens aimed at the closed bedroom doors that were splintered and dark, as if guarding secrets. The hallway stretched into shadow, the air within it colder, carrying a faint, sour smell like rotting fruit. I connected both cameras to my laptop, the live feeds flickering to life on the screen, their grainy images amplifying the cabin's eerie stillness. The main room feed showed the empty space, the fireplace a dark maw, while the hallway feed revealed only darkness, the doors barely visible at the edge of the frame. I hit record on the main camera and leaned into its lens, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "All right, here we are in the middle of nowhere," I said, my voice echoing unnaturally in the silent room. "Just me, my cameras, and a creepy old cabin. If anything weird happens tonight, I'll catch it on film. Not that I expect anything. This is just for fun, a little experiment to spice up the weekend." But as I spoke, the cabin seemed to respond, a low groan reverberating through the walls, like the settling of ancient timbers or something deeper, more alive. A cold draft slithered through the cracks in the walls, carrying the scent of mold and a faint metallic tang, like old blood. I shivered, pulling my jacket tighter, and glanced at the laptop. The hallway camera flickered, its screen flashing static for a split second before stabilizing. The doors now sharper in the frame, as if the camera had adjusted to something I couldn't see. "Old wiring," I muttered, my voice less steady than I wanted. I checked the cables, tugging at them to ensure they were secure, the batteries fully charged. The static had been brief, but it left a knot in my stomach, a prickle on the back of my neck. I sat on the sagging couch, its springs creaking under my weight, and stared at the live feeds, trying to focus on the hum of the equipment, the familiar whir of the camera's autofocus. But the silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards. As if someone were pacing just out of sight, that I glanced at the scratched door frame. The handprint smudge on the mirror catching the flashlight's beam, its edges glistening like it had been made moments ago. The photographs on the floor seemed to shift, their faces staring up at me, their eyes more defined now, gleaming with a faint, unnatural light. I forced a laugh, the sound hollow and forced. Come on, David, it's just a creepy old place. Nothing's here. But the words felt like a challenge, and the air grew colder, the shadows deeper, pooling in the corners like liquid night. The laptop screen flickered again, the hallway feed blurring at the edges, as if something were pressing against the lens, distorting the image. I leaned closer, my heart quickening, and saw a faint ripple in the darkness, like a shadow moving just beyond the camera's reach. It was gone in an instant, but my breath caught, and I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. The cabin groaned again, louder this time, the sound coming from the walls, the ceiling, the floor, as if it were alive, responding to my presence. I checked the main camera, its lens still pointed at the room, and whispered to myself, just get through the night. It's just a cabin. But the photographs on the floor seemed to shift again, inching closer, their eyes following me. The mirror above the fireplace reflected my pale face, but for a moment, I swore I saw something else. A flicker of movement, a shadow behind me. Too quick to be sure. I spun around, the flashlight trembling in my hand, but the room was empty. The unease I'd felt upon arrival had grown into a quiet certainty. I was being watched, and the cabin was no longer just a place. It was a presence, waiting for me to acknowledge it. The clock on my laptop ticked past midnight, its glowing digits casting a faint blue light across the main room of the cabin. I sat cross-legged on the sagging plaid couch, its springs groaning under my weight, my eyes glued to the live feeds from the two cameras. The main room feed showed nothing but the empty space, the cold stone fireplace a dark void, its ash-streaked hearth untouched by warmth. The hallway feed was darker. The closed bedroom, doors barely visible at the edge of the frame, their splintered surfaces seeming to pulse in the grainy image. The cabin was silent, but it was a heavy silence, thick with anticipation, as if the air itself were holding its breath. My flashlight rested on the table beside me, its beam dimmed to conserve battery, but the shadows it cast seemed to writhe, stretching unnaturally across the scarred walls. I was reviewing the footage, trying to convince myself the cabin's quirks, the creaking floorboards, the smudged mirror, the shifting photographs, were just products of an overactive imagination. But then I saw it on the hallway feed. A faint shadow glided across the floor, swift and formless, like a wisp of smoke caught in a breeze. It moved from one side of the corridor to the other, too deliberate to be a trick of the light, its edges blurring as if it didn't fully belong to this world. My heart thudded, a sharp jolt that echoed in my ears, and I leaned closer to the laptop, my breath catching. No way, I whispered, my voice barely audible, swallowed by the cabin's oppressive quiet. I rewound the footage, my fingers trembling on the trackpad, and there was again, a human-like shape, distorted and elongated, its movements jerky, like a figure caught between frames of an old film. It was unmistakable, undeniable, and it sent a chill racing down my spine. I replayed it twice more, hoping for a rational explanation, a passing animal, a reflection, but none fit. The shadow was too solid, too purposeful, its form too humanoid to dismiss. My stomach churned, and I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. "This is just a glitch," I muttered, but the words felt hollow, a desperate attempt to cling to logic. The photographs on the floor seemed to stare up at me, their eyes gleaming faintly in the flashlight's beam, as if they knew what I'd seen. I forced myself to stand, my legs unsteady, and grabbed my flashlight and handheld camera, the weight of both grounding me as I moved toward the hallway. "Just check it out," I told myself, my voice trembling. "It's nothing. You're just tired." The air grew colder as I approached the corridor, the sour smell of rotting fruit now mingling with a sharp, metallic tang, like blood or rust. The floorboards creaked beneath my steps, each sound amplified, echoing like a heartbeat in the stillness. I swept the flashlight's beam down the hallway, its light trembling in my grip, revealing only the scarred bedroom doors, their surfaces etched with jagged scratches that seemed fresher now, deeper. My camera recorded as I moved, its lens capturing the darkness, but the screen showed nothing unusual, just the empty corridor, the doors silent and still. I took a step forward, my breath visible in the icy air, when bang, the door at the far end slammed shut with a force that shook the walls, the sound reverberating through the cabin like a gunshot. I stumbled back, my flashlight flickering, its beams stuttering into darkness for a heart-stopping moment before flaring back to life. "What the hell?" I gasped, swinging the light wildly across the hallway. The door was closed, its surface unmoving, but the air was colder now, so cold it stung my lungs, my breath forming thick clouds that lingered too long. The camera screen flickered, static crawling across it, and for a fleeting second, I saw something, a shadow, tall and indistinct, standing at the end of the hallway, its form blurring into the darkness. I blinked, and it was gone, the screen showing only the empty corridor. But the feeling of being watched was overwhelming, a pressure on my chest that made it hard to breathe, as if the cabin itself were closing in, its walls tightening like a trap. I backed into the main room, my eyes darting to the corners, half expecting something to lunge from the shadows. The photographs on the floor had shifted again, now forming a rough semicircle around the couch, their faces staring up with that unnatural gleam. The mirror above the fireplace caught my reflection, but it was wrong. My face too pale, my eyes too wide, and for a moment I swore I saw a shadow move behind me, its form fleeting but unmistakable. I spun around, the flashlight trembling, but the room was empty. My heart pounded, a deafening drumbeat, and I whispered to the camera, "Something's here." I saw it. It's real. The words felt like a confession, an acknowledgement that I was no longer just filming for fun. I was documenting a nightmare. For the first time that night, fear took root, not just unease, but a bone-deep terror that I was no longer in control, that something in this cabin had been waiting for me all along. The echo of the slamming door still reverberated in my ears, a violent reminder that the cabin was no longer just a place. It was alive, hostile, and aware of me. I stood frozen in the main room, my flashlight clutched like a lifeline, its trembling beam casting jagged shadows across the scarred walls. The air was frigid now, so cold my breath formed thick clouds that lingered in the dim glow of the flickering laptop screen. The camera's live feed from the hallway showed nothing but darkness, the closed doors silent. Yet the oppressive weight of being watched pressed against my chest, making every breath a struggle. My handheld camera shook in my grip, its recording light a faint beacon in the gloom, but the footage felt like a witness to my unraveling sanity. The silence that followed the door's slam was suffocating, but it didn't last. A faint voice broke through, soft and deliberate, whispering my name. David. It was barely audible, like a breath carried on the wind, but it sliced through me, sending a jolt of ice down my spine. I spun around, sweeping the flashlight across the room, expecting to see someone, anyone, standing in the shadows. But the main room was empty, the sagging couch and cold fireplace unchanged, the photographs on the floor staring up with their gleaming, unnatural eyes. My heart pounded, a deafening drumbeat that drowned out the cabin's creaks, and I forced myself to call out, my voice cracking. "Who's there? Show yourself." No answer came, only the slow, heavy sound of breathing, not mine, coming from somewhere behind me. It was rhythmic, deliberate, like someone standing just out of sight, their breath warm and sour, brushing the back of my neck. I whipped around, the flashlight's beam darting wildly, but the room remained empty, the shadows still. The breathing grew louder, closer, now accompanied by a low hum, like static emanating from the walls themselves, as if the cabin were alive, its pulse syncing with my racing heart. I lifted the handheld camera, my hands trembling so badly the lens shook, and checked the screen. There, at the far end of the hallway, stood a pale figure, a woman, her form translucent, her dress torn and ragged, her face a blurred smear of light where features should have been. Her head was tilted at an unnatural angle, her body motionless but radiating a quiet menace. I gasped, my eyes snapping to the hallway itself. But it was empty, the doors still, the darkness unbroken. I looked back at the camera, and she was gone, the screen showing only the dark corridor, but the air grew colder, the sour smell of rotting fruit now laced with a metallic tang, like blood. "David," the whisper came again, clearer now, not from the hallway, but from all around me, as if the walls themselves were speaking. My stomach lurched, and I backed toward the couch, tripping over a photograph on the floor. It flipped over, revealing a handwritten note on the back. "She sees you." My breath caught, and I kicked the photograph away, but the others seemed to shift, their eyes gleaming brighter, as if they were watching, judging. I clutched the camera tighter, whispering to it, "This is real." I heard it. I saw her. The words were a desperate anchor, a plea to the footage to prove I wasn't losing my mind. I forced myself to move toward the hallway, my flashlight trembling, the camera recording every step. The floorboards groaned, not just under my weight, but in a rhythm that didn't match my steps, as if someone were walking beside me. Their presence a cold weight on my shoulder that I stopped, and the creaking continued for a moment, a slow, deliberate sound that sent a shiver down my spine. The flashlight flickered again, its beam dimming, and I slapped it against my palm, muttering, "Come on, don't die on me." The light steadied, but the camera's screen flickered, static crawling across it. And for a fleeting moment, I saw her again. The pale woman, closer now, her blurred face inches from the lens, her mouth opening in a silent scream. I stumbled back, the camera slipping from my hands and clattering to the floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silent cabin. The breathing returned, now a rasping, guttural sound, coming from the walls, the ceiling, the floor, as if the cabin were exhaling its malice. I scrambled to retrieve the camera, my hands shaking, and checked the screen. It was blank, but the recording light was still on, capturing whatever was happening. The air grew heavier, the pressure on my chest unbearable, as if the cabin were trying to crush me. I backed against the wall, the wood cold and clammy under my fingers, and whispered, "What do you want?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, but the whispers responded, not with words but with a low, mocking laugh that seemed to come from inside my skull. My heart raced, my vision blurring, and I realized I was no longer just a guest in this cabin. I was prey, caught in a trap set by something that knew my name and wasn't letting go. The cabin had transformed into a living nightmare, its walls pulsing with a malice that seemed to feed on my fear. I stood trembling in the main room, my back pressed against the cold, clammy wood of the wall, the handheld camera shaking in my grip, its recording light a faint beacon in the suffocating darkness. The air was icy, so cold it burned my lungs, my breath forming thick clouds that lingered in the flickering glow of the laptop screen. The sour smell of rotting fruit had intensified, now mingled with a sharp, metallic tang, like blood or rusted iron, that clung to the back of my throat. The photographs on the floor, their gleaming eyes staring up at me, seemed to shift closer, forming a tightening circle that felt like a trap. My heart pounded, a deafening drumbeat that drowned out the cabin's groans. But nothing could silence the whispers, my name, David, David, echoing from the walls, the ceiling, the floor, as if the cabin itself were speaking. The laptop screen flickered wildly, the hallway feed now a chaotic blur of static and shadows. I forced myself to look, my hands trembling as I gripped the table, and saw her, the pale woman from the camera, her translucent form moving jerkily toward the main room. Her torn dress trailed behind her, her blurred face a smear of light, her hollow eyes fixed on the lens as if she could see me through it. Each step echoed, a heavy thud reverberating through the floorboards, growing louder, closer, but when I tore my gaze from the screen to the hallway itself, it was empty, the doors still, the darkness unbroken. "This isn't happening," I whispered, my voice cracking, but the words were swallowed by a sudden crash. The old leather-bound journal I'd found earlier flew off the table, landing with a thud that shook the room, its pages flipping violently as if caught in a storm. I stumbled toward it, my flashlight trembling, and saw the pages stop on a sketch, a crude, ink-drawn image of a woman in a tattered dress, her face featureless, her hands outstretched as if reaching for something or someone. My stomach lurched, and I slammed the journal shut, but the cabin responded with a vengeance. The window shutters slammed open, the wood splintering against the frame, though the fog outside was still unmoving. A gust of icy wind tore through the room, scattering the photographs across the floor, their faces twisting in the flashlight's beam, their eyes now gleaming with an unnatural, sickly green light. I backed away, tripping over the couch, my heart racing as the wind howled, carrying whispers that weren't just my name now, but fragments of sentences. Stay. You're ours, you can't leave. The fireplace erupted in a roar of blue flames, the unnatural light flooding the room, casting writhing shadows that danced across the walls. Hands reaching, faces twisting, a woman's silhouette with a blurred face. The flames pulsed, their glow sickly and cold, illuminating the scratches on the walls, which now looked like fresh wounds, oozing a dark, viscous substance that glistened in the light. I screamed a raw, desperate sound and clutched the camera, its lens still recording, capturing the madness unfolding around me. The laptop screen flickered again, the hallway feed now showing the woman closer, her form filling the frame, her hollow eyes boring into me. I spun around, expecting to see her in the room, but it was empty, the shadows pulsing in time with the flames. The floorboards groaned, not under my weight, but in a rhythm that mimicked footsteps circling me, closing in. The air grew heavier, the pressure on my chest unbearable, as if the cabin were trying to crush me. I stumbled to the table, my hands shaking as I grabbed the laptop, hoping to shut it down, to stop the feed, but the screen froze on her face, blurred, featureless, her mouth opening in a silent scream. The footsteps grew louder, faster, echoing not just from the hallway, but from above, below, all around, as if the cabin were alive, its walls closing in. The photographs on the floor slid toward me, their eyes gleaming brighter, and I kicked them away, my foot trembling. But they returned, forming a tighter circle, their faces now contorted, mouths open as if whispering along with the voices. I backed against the wall, my flashlight flickering, its beam dimming as if the cabin were draining its power. The camera's screen flickered too, static crawling across it, and for a moment I saw her again, standing in the main room, her form translucent, her hand reaching toward me. I dropped the camera, the clatter echoing, and screamed again, my voice raw and ragged. "Leave me alone," I shouted, but the words were drowned by a low, guttural laugh that seemed to come from the walls themselves, mocking my desperation. The blue flames flared brighter, the shadows writhing into shapes. Hands, faces, a woman's silhouette, closing in, their edges blurring as if they were reaching out of the walls. I sank to the floor, my back against the couch, clutching my knees, my mind screaming to run, but my body paralyzed by fear. The cabin wasn't just haunted, it was a predator, and I was its prey, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. The cabin was no longer a place. It was a living entity, its walls throbbing with a malice that seemed to feed on my fear. I crouched on the floor, my back pressed against the sagging couch, the handheld camera clutched to my chest, its recording light flickering like a dying star in the suffocating darkness. The blue flames in the fireplace had dimmed to a sickly glow, casting eerie shadows that writhed across the walls, forming shapes. Hands, faces, a woman's silhouette that seemed to pulse in time with my racing heart. The air was frigid, so cold it burned my skin, my breath forming thick clouds that hung in the dim light. The sour, metallic smell of blood and decay choked my throat, and the photographs on the floor, their gleaming eyes staring up, had tightened their circle around me, as if closing in for the kill. The whispers, "David, stay. You're ours," swirled around me, no longer just voices but a chorus of anguish and rage, echoing from the walls, the ceiling, the floor. The laptop screen, frozen on the pale woman's blurred face, flickered and went black, plunging the room into near darkness. The camera screen was blank too, but its recording light stayed on, capturing the madness I could feel but not fully see. The footsteps that had echoed earlier had stopped, replaced by a silence so heavy it pressed against my eardrums, as if the cabin were holding its breath, waiting for its next move. My body trembled, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the camera, my mind screaming to run, to escape, but my legs were rooted, paralyzed by a terror that felt like it was seeping into my bones. Then it happened, the unthinkable. The air in front of me shimmered, like heat rising from a desert road, and she appeared. A translucent woman, her form flickering like a broken film reel, stood directly in front of me. Her dress was torn, its ragged edges trailing into the darkness. Her head tilted at an unnatural angle. Her face a blurred smear of pale light where eyes and a mouth should have been. Her presence radiated sorrow and rage, a force so overwhelming it crushed the air from my lungs. Her mouth opened in a silent scream, the soundless wave hitting me like a physical blow, rippling through the room and shaking the photographs on the floor. I dropped my flashlight, the beam spinning wildly across the room, plunging us into near darkness. The only light now the camera's faint glow and the dying embers of the blue flames. In that dim light, I saw her move, gliding, not walking, her form inching closer, her blurred face now inches from mine. An icy pressure gripped my arm, like fingers made of frost, digging through my jacket into my skin. The cold was unbearable, spreading from my arm to my chest, my heart stuttering as if she were squeezing it. I gasped, my body paralyzed, my eyes locked on her featureless face, her hollow sockets seeming to bore into me, seeing not just my fear, but my very soul. "Please," I whispered, my voice barely a breath. "Leave me alone." But the pressure tightened, and the whispers surged, a cacophony of voices now inside my head. "David, you can't leave. You belong to us." I wrenched my arm free, the effort sending me sprawling against the couch, the impact jarring me out of my paralysis. She vanished, her form dissolving into the darkness, but the cold lingered, a ghostly bruise throbbing on my arm. The camera's light flickered, and I grabbed it, my hands shaking, checking the screen. It was blank, but the recording light pulsed, as if capturing her presence, even now. The laptop flickered back to life, the hallway feed showing nothing but darkness, but the air was heavier, the pressure on my chest unbearable, as if the cabin were trying to crush me. The shutters slammed shut, then open again, the wood cracking with each movement, and footsteps erupted overhead, heavy, deliberate, pacing in the attic as if something were stalking me from above. I curled into a ball, my back against the couch, whispering to the camera she was here. She touched me. "This is real." The words were a desperate plea, a tether to reality, as my sanity frayed. The photographs on the floor shifted again, their eyes gleaming brighter, and one slid toward me, stopping at my feet. I didn't dare touch it, but I saw the handwritten note on the back. She's not alone. My stomach lurched, and I kicked it away, but the other photographs moved closer, their faces contorted now, mouths open as if whispering along with the voices. The cabin groaned, a low, guttural sound, as if responding to my fear, the walls shuddering, the floorboards creaking in a rhythm that mimicked her steps. The blue flames flared briefly, casting a sickly light that illuminated a shadow on the wall. Not mine, but hers, tall and distorted, her outstretched hand reaching toward me. I screamed a raw, guttural sound and scrambled to my feet, clutching the camera, my eyes darting to the corners where the shadows seemed to pulse, alive and hungry. The icy pressure returned, brushing my neck this time like fingers tracing my spine, and I spun around, expecting to see her, but the room was empty. The whispers grew louder, a single voice now, low and menacing. "You can't hide." I sank back to the floor, my heart pounding, my mind reeling, knowing that whatever she wasn't gone. She was here in the walls, in the air, in me, and the night was far from over. The cabin had become a prison, its walls a living cage that pulsed with malice, trapping me in a nightmare I couldn't escape. I huddled in the corner of the main room, my back pressed against the cold, clammy wood, the handheld camera clutched to my chest like a lifeline. Its recording light flickered weakly, a dying ember in the suffocating darkness, the only proof that I was still here, still fighting. The blue flames in the fireplace had faded to a sickly glow, casting eerie shadows that writhed across the walls. Hands reaching, faces twisting, a woman's silhouette with a blurred face, her form flickering like a broken reel. The air was frigid, so cold it burned my skin, my breath forming thick clouds that lingered in the dim light. The sour, metallic smell of blood and decay choked my throat, and the photographs on the floor, their gleaming eyes staring up, had tightened their circle around me, their faces now contorted, mouths open as if whispering in sync with the voices that haunted me. The whispers, "David, stay. You're ours," swirled around me. Relentless chorus of voices, male and female, young and old, as if the cabin held a legion of restless spirits. They came from everywhere, walls, ceiling, floor, boring into my skull, each syllable tightening the vice of panic around my chest. I pressed my hands over my ears, whispering to the camera, "This is real. This is really happening. I don't know if I'll make it through the night." My voice was barely audible, drowned by the cabin's onslaught, doors slamming in the hallway, each bang shaking the walls like gunfire, footsteps racing overhead, heavy and deliberate, as if something were pacing in the attic, stalking me from above, shutters rattling, their wood cracking as they opened and closed in a violent rhythm, though the fog outside remained still. The photographs on the floor began to move again, sliding across the wood as if pushed by unseen hands, their circle tightening until they pressed against my boots. I kicked one away, my leg trembling, and it flipped over, revealing another handwritten note. "They never leave." My stomach lurched, and I scrambled to my feet, scattering the photographs. But they slid back into place, their eyes gleaming brighter, their faces now twisted into expressions of anguish and rage. "Stop it!" I screamed, my voice raw and ragged, but the cabin answered with a low, guttural laugh that seemed to come from the walls themselves, mocking my desperation. The air grew heavier, the pressure on my chest unbearable, as if the cabin were trying to crush me. Shadows pulsed on the walls, not just dancing but forming shapes. A hand here, a face there, a woman's silhouette with outstretched arms, her blurred face tilting as if watching me. The flashlight flickered, its beam dimming, and I slapped it against my palm, muttering, "Don't die on me." The light steadied, but the camera's screen flickered, static crawling across it, showing glimpses of the pale woman, her form closer now, her hollow eyes fixed on me, her hand reaching through the screen as if she could touch me again. I dropped the camera, the clatter echoing, and backed into the corner, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. The icy pressure returned, brushing my neck like fingers tracing my spine, then gripping my shoulder colder and harder than before, as if she were trying to hold me in place. I gasped, spinning around, but the room was empty, the shadows pulsing in time with the footsteps overhead. The whispers grew louder, a single voice now low and menacing. "You can't hide." I sank to my knees, clutching my head, my mind fraying under the relentless assault. The floorboards groaned, mimicking footsteps circling me, closer, faster, as if the cabin itself were closing in. The photographs slid toward me again, their eyes gleaming with that sickly green light, and one flipped over, revealing another note. "You're part of us now." I screamed a raw, guttural sound that tore from my throat and lunged for the door, my hands fumbling with the knob, but it wouldn't turn, as if locked by an unseen force. The footsteps overhead grew frantic, racing from one end of the attic to the other, and the shutters slammed shut, plunging the room into near darkness. The camera's recording light flickered, the only light left, and I whispered to it, my voice trembling, "If anyone finds this, no, I didn't imagine it. It's here. It's real." The cabin groaned in response, a deep, guttural sound that shook the walls, and the shadows pulsed, forming a woman's silhouette on the wall, her hand reaching toward me, her blurred face inches from mine. I curled into a ball, my back against the wall, my mind screaming to run, but my body paralyzed, knowing the night was far from over and the cabin wasn't done with me yet. The night had stretched into an eternity of terror, each minute a relentless assault on my sanity as the cabin's malevolent presence closed in. I remained curled in the corner of the main room, my back pressed against the cold, clammy wall, the handheld camera clutched to my chest, its flickering recording light the only anchor in the suffocating darkness. The blue flames in the fireplace had died, leaving only cold ash, but the air remained frigid, my breath forming trembling clouds that lingered in the dim glow of the dying flashlight. The photographs on the floor, their gleaming eyes and contorted faces, had stopped moving, but their circle around me felt like a noose, their handwritten warnings. "They never leave, and you're part of us now," burned into my memory. The whispers had faded, the footsteps overhead silenced, but the oppressive weight of the cabin's presence lingered, as if it were merely pausing, waiting for its next move. As the first faint light of dawn crept through the cracked window shutters, the cabin fell eerily silent, as if a switch had been flipped. The relentless cacophony, slamming doors, racing footsteps, mocking whispers, stopped abruptly, leaving a calm so stark it felt unnatural. The air remained cold, but the crushing pressure on my chest eased, allowing me to draw a shaky breath. I stayed in my corner, my body trembling from exhaustion and fear, my eyes darting to the shadows, half expecting the pale woman's blurred face to reappear. The photographs on the floor lay scattered, their eyes no longer gleaming, just faded images of forgotten faces, their menace dulled by the growing light. The laptop screen was blank, its battery drained, and the camera's recording light flickered one last time before shutting off, as if it, too, had endured all it could. I forced myself to stand, my legs weak and unsteady, my joints aching from hours of tension. The floorboards creaked under my weight, but the sound was ordinary now, lacking the menacing rhythm of the night. I stumbled to the window, my hands trembling as I parted the splintered shutters. The fog outside had thinned, revealing the forest beyond, tall pines standing stark and silent, their branches no longer clawing but still bathed in the pale, gray light of dawn. The sour, metallic smell of blood and decay had faded, replaced by the clean, sharp scent of wet earth and pine. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass, my breath fogging the pain, and whispered, "It's over." But the words felt hollow, a fragile hope overshadowed by the memory of her icy touch, her hollow eyes, her voice in my head. I gathered my equipment with shaking hands, moving slowly, as if any sudden motion might awaken the cabin's wrath. The cameras, laptop, and tripod felt heavier, as if imbued with a night's terror. The journal lay closed on the floor, its leather cover scarred and worn. I left it there, unwilling to touch it. Its sketch of the pale woman burned into my mind. The photographs remained scattered, their faces blank now, but I avoided looking at them, afraid their eyes might gleam again. The mirror above the fireplace reflected my haggard face, pale sweat-streaked, my eyes wide with exhaustion, but I swore I saw a faint smudge, a handprint, lingering on the glass, its edges glistening as if freshly made. I turned away, my heart quickening, and focused on packing, each movement a deliberate act of survival. The front door creaked as I opened it, the hinges no longer groaning with menace, but merely tired, worn by age. I stepped outside, the morning air sharp and clean, a stark contrast to the cabin's suffocating gloom. My boots crunched on the gravel path, the sound grounding me as I stumbled to my car. The vehicle was untouched, its windows fogged with condensation, but as I threw my gear into the back seat, I felt a prickle on my neck, as if the cabin were watching me leave. I slid into the driver's seat, slamming the door, and glanced at the rearview mirror. The cabin stood in the clearing, its silhouette dark against the dawn, but for a moment I swore I saw a flicker of green light in one of the windows, the same sickly glow from the fireplace. My stomach lurched, and I turned the ignition, the engine roaring to life, a lifeline to escape. As I drove away, the cabin shrank in the rearview mirror, swallowed by the pines and the lingering fog. The road was bumpy, each jolt a reminder of the night's terror, but the distance gave me a fragile sense of safety. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, and I whispered to myself, "You made it. You're out." But the bruise on my arm, where her icy fingers had gripped me, throbbed with a dull, persistent ache and a memory of her voice. "You're part of us now," echoed in my mind. The cabin was behind me, but its shadow clung to me, a weight I couldn't shake, a quiet certainty that I hadn't truly escaped. Days after fleeing the cabin, I sat in my city apartment, the hum of traffic outside a faint comfort against the silence of my room. The lights were on, the door locked, the curtains drawn, but the safety of the familiar felt fragile, like a thin veil over the terror I'd left behind. My camera gear sat untouched in the corner, a silent reminder of the night in the Pacific Northwest that had shattered my sense of reality. My hands trembled as I pulled the laptop from its bag, the weight of it heavier than it should have been, as if it carried the cabin's malice within its circuits. The bruise on my arm, where the pale woman's icy fingers had gripped me, still throbbed faintly, a ghostly mark that refused to fade. I hadn't slept well since that night, my dreams haunted by whispers, blue flames, and her blurred face, her hollow eyes staring through me. But I needed answers, needed to know if what I'd experienced was real or if my mind had betrayed me. The footage was my only proof. I plugged in the cameras, my fingers unsteady, the files loading slowly on the laptop screen, each second stretching my nerves tighter. The main room and hallway feeds appeared, their grainy images a portal back to that nightmare. I hesitated, my heart pounding before hitting play. The footage began innocently enough, my voice forced and cheerful, saying, "Just me, my cameras, and a creepy old cabin." But even in those early moments, I noticed details I'd missed. The photographs on the floor, their eyes gleaming faintly even then. The mirror smudge, pulsing like a heartbeat in the flashlight's beam. The hallway shadows, darker than they should have been, rippling at the edges. Then came the disturbances. The hallway feed showed the shadow gliding across the floor, its form distorted and humanoid, moving with a purpose that made my stomach churn. The door slamming shut echoed through the laptop's speakers, deafening and violent, the frame shaking as if struck by an unseen force. The main room feed captured the journal flying off the table, its pages flipping to the sketch of the pale woman, her featureless face staring up at the camera. The blue flames erupted in the fireplace, their sickly glow casting writhing shadows, hands, faces, her silhouette. Across the walls, their movements synchronized with the whispers that filled the audio. "David, stay. You're ours." My breath caught as the footage reached the moment she appeared. The hallway feed showed her, translucent, her torn dress trailing, her blurred face filling the screen, her hollow eyes boring into the lens. The main room feed captured her materializing in front of me, her form flickering like a broken reel, her hand reaching toward the camera as I screamed. The audio was raw, my voice ragged with terror, and I saw my arm jerk as if pulled by an unseen force, the moment her icy fingers gripped me. The footage was undeniable, a record of something beyond explanation, but brought no comfort, only a fresh wave of dread that made my apartment feel too small, too dark, that I paused the video, my heart racing, and zoomed in on her face. It was featureless, a smear of pale light, but her eyes, hollow, endless, seemed to stare through the screen straight into me. My hand shook as I slammed the laptop shut, the sound echoing like the cabin's slamming doors. I sat in silence, my breath ragged, the room suddenly colder, the bruise on my arm throbbing as if her touch were fresh. The footage was proof, but it was also a curse, a digital ghost that refused to let me go. I uploaded the files to a private server, unable to delete them, but too afraid to keep them on my laptop. They're still there, locked away, a record of that night I can't bring myself to watch again. I try to research the cabin's history, scouring online forums and local archives. I found vague mentions of a settler family who vanished in the 1800s, their land abandoned until the cabin was built decades later. Locals called it cursed, avoiding the area, but no one offered details, as if speaking of it might summon its wrath. The photographs, the journal, the pale woman, they pointed to something older, something tied to the land itself, a restless force that claimed anyone who stayed too long. The footage confirmed it, but it also confirmed my fear. I hadn't just encountered a ghost. I'd been marked by it, changed by it, and the bruise on my arm was a reminder that some part of that night was still with me. Years have passed since that night in the cabin, but its shadow clings to me like a second skin, a constant presence that seeps into the quiet corners of my life. I've tried to move forward, to bury the terror in the rhythms of city life. Work, coffee, crowded streets. But the memory of the pale woman, her icy touch, and her whispered words, "You're part of us now," remains as vivid as if it happened last night. The bruise on my arm is faded, but I still feel it sometimes, a faint throb that pulses when the world grows still, as if her fingers are still there, gripping me from beyond. My cameras sit in a locked case, untouched for months. Their lens is a reminder of the footage that captured a truth I can't unsee. The files are stored on a private server, a digital ghost I can't bring myself to delete, but I haven't watched them since that first harrowing review. The cabin changed me, rewrote my understanding of reality, and left me with a fear that lingers like a low hum in the back of my mind. I used to be a skeptic, dismissing ghost stories as folklore for the gullible, my camera a tool for capturing beauty, not horror. But that night in the Pacific Northwest shattered my certainty. The pale woman, the blue flames, the photographs with their gleaming eyes, they weren't tricks of the mind or glitches in the footage. They were real, a glimpse into a world where the veil between the living and the restless is thin, permeable. I've spent hours researching the cabin's history, digging through obscure forums and dusty library archives, but the answers are fragmented, like the photographs scattered on that floor. The land was once home to a settler family who vanished in the 1800s, their fate undocumented, their graves unmarked. Locals call the area cursed, avoiding the cabin with a fear that feels ancient, rooted in stories they won't share. Some say the cabin was built on sacred ground, disturbed by greed or violence. Its soil soaked with a restless energy that claims anyone who lingers too long. The pale woman, was she one of those lost souls, trapped in an endless loop of sorrow and rage? Or was she something darker, a manifestation of the land's anger, using her form to lure me into its trap? The footage is my proof, a record of shadows gliding, doors slamming, and her blurred face staring through the lens. But it's also a curse, a reminder that I didn't just witness the paranormal, I became part of it. I avoid isolated places now, wary of the quiet, the dark. Old buildings make my skin crawl, their creaking floors too reminiscent of the cabin's groans. I steer clear of mirrors at night, afraid of seeing a smudge, a handprint, or worse, her hollow eyes staring back. Sleep is a battle. My dreams haunted by fog-choked forests, endless hallways, and a sickly green glow pulsing from a window I can't escape. In those dreams, I'm back in the cabin, the door locked, the photographs circling me, her voice whispering my name. David, I wait gasping, my heart racing, and check the lock case where my cameras rest, half expecting them to be recording on their own, capturing her presence in my apartment. I've shared my story sparingly, with friends who nod politely or strangers on obscure forums who share their own tales of the unexplained. Some believe me, their eyes wide with recognition. Others smile, their skepticism a mirror of my own before that night. I don't blame them. I wouldn't have believed it either. But I urge anyone listening, trust your instincts. If a place feels wrong, if the air grows heavy and the shadows seem to watch, don't stay. Don't dismiss the prickle on your neck, the whisper you can't quite hear, the cold that seeps into your bones. The world is full of places like that cabin, where the past refuses to rest, where the restless claim those who linger too long. I'll never return to that place, never drive down that fog-choked road again. But sometimes in the dead of night, when the city is quiet and the wind howls, I feel it, a faint pull like a hand brushing my shoulder, a whisper calling me back. The bruise on my arm throbs, a ghostly reminder, and I wonder if I truly escaped or if some part of the cabin came with me, woven into my shadow, waiting for the right moment to stir. If you felt that chill, heard that whisper, seen that shadow, you know what I mean. Share your story if you dare. The truth is often stranger and far scarier than we want to believe.